psychology behind the growing number of crimes perpetuated by teenagers, especially murder. I'm now joined by clinical psychologist Candice Lambert. Candice, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this morning. So as a clinical psychologist, what insights can you provide into the factors such as Nasipi that she has put out in terms of the rise in the acts of violence and killings among young people in South Africa? How do psychology, social, as well as the environmental influences interact to shape the behaviors and the attitudes of these young people that lead to these violent acts?
Good morning, and good morning to your listeners and viewers. Thanks so much for having me. So this is a quite concerning trend that has been happening, and it's so complicated because humans are complicated. So it's not a black and white scenario that we can explain it in that way. And my question and wonder is always: is journalism just increasing the effectiveness that we are reporting this? But in this scenario, I would say not. There is a trend of anger, aggression, and just this lost state of the youth. It's critical to explain that, first of all, social media influences has taken a big toll, and it has increased in terms of the youth and the usage of social media. What I do want to explain is just how do we raise compassionate and resilient children, because that's kind of what we do at Wellness Dialogue Group. And so the four elements are compassion, connection, control, and communication. Now, when I say this, I'm saying that the influences and the social net and kind of the people that are influencing kids, such as the teachers, parents, peers, siblings, if they have this kind of resilience and protective factors that we are raising our kids with, they won't necessarily result to anger, aggression, and just the state of lostness and adverse behaviors. It also comes down to healthy discipline. And so I also feel like there could be just this increase in violence and neglect within homes, in society, and it's not necessarily chosen. It's something that can be just as a consequence to joblessness and just the stress of the economy and where we find ourselves in South Africa. And I do feel that the government needs to do a lot more just in terms of protecting and empowering our country to be able to support early childhood interventions and development.
I mean, you make mention of anger and a lost state of the young people in South Africa, and you make mention of just some of the reasons why they find themselves in those situations. Talk to us about trauma and abuse and just mental health wellness rather within the home that contributes to some of these acts by these young children.
Yeah. So discipline, for example, is sort of misconstrued as being, needing physical intervention, whereas the word discipline comes from the word discipleship, which means that you cannot disciple someone or discipline someone that doesn't trust you. That's the basis. The next thing, just in terms of trauma is not an event that has taken place, but what happens inside of us as a result of that event that has taken place. So we often talk about big T and small t. Big T is your molestation, abuse within the home, even witnessing abuse between partners or parents. And then small t is more neglect, isolation, not connecting with your children. Because we're also coming from a generation where our parents, the generation that came before us, were not necessarily taught how to manage emotions, how to allow kids to express themselves, how to just connect with them and feel as though they are human before they are children. Oftentimes we want to dominate kids because we feel like we know more than them. And again, going back to the fact that all scenarios are very complicated and not each, you can't explain one and then it provides the answers to the other. So we just need to make sure that we understand that there's varying factors that come into play.
It certainly can't be a blanket approach. You made mention of social media influences earlier on. How do societal norms, peer influences, the exposure of the media, and just the community dynamics contribute to shaping the attitudes towards violence and conflict? And how would you advise parents to be able to find a balance in their children being exposed to media, to social media, but also taking in some of that information in a way that doesn't then destroy how the child thinks when it comes to conflict resolution?
Yeah, so it's very critical for us to understand that, for example, WhatsApp's age restriction is only 16 and upwards, whereas we find that 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds are all on social media, all on WhatsApp, and it becomes this unsafe scenario. Because remember, parents are not responsible for their kids' happiness; they are responsible for their children's well-being and their safety. And that pertains to, you know, their physical, their emotional, and their psychological safety. When it comes to social media, what I would suggest parents do is create sort of boundaries in the home. You know, social media or phones not at the dinner table, phones not in your rooms, only, you know, 15 minutes or whatever the case would be, and have the various protective apps that the parents can now, you know, monitor what's happening on their phones, and really to try and delay the phone usage as much as possible in terms of age. So really, if they need it for school, to have that iPad that's kind of this family iPad that anyone can use for homework, or even and even later on, when they're 18 years old and older, they then start to have access to these sort of things where their brain has been able to be developed, and they have an understanding of the world better. Whereas the younger we kind of give social media to our kids, the bigger the influence and the more negative that influence will be, because they can't discern reality from fiction.
Of course. Candace, thank you so much for your time and for this input. I mean, it's very important for